Okay, so it is 6:04. Here's Melinda, perfect timing. Workshop number 8 of 12 in the ongoing 65 Main Master Plan Planning Project. We're in the education unit, meaning we are discussing priorities and possibilities for a curriculum connecting Turtelot Memorial High School to the function of the new facility. We've been talking about essentially a farm to fork career path, although not just that, but is tying the agriculture programming and offerings that we're going to presumably install or initiate in the facility to connect in several ways. For example, beginning farmers who may want to connect with the marketing students in the business program, connecting to the culinary program. So Eric Francis is here. He is a consultant to the school and their existing aquaponics project. And he's going to share a presentation and talk about curriculum that he and his company Trifecta have already developed. And then after that, we can sort of talk amongst ourselves about, how we feel it applies. Before Eric does that, I'll just give you some update. There are currently 3 open grant requests related to this property, sort of in the wind in various states of being applied for, and one that will be going in by mid to end of June. The first one you guys all know about is the that little Kubota hometown award. If we are selected as a finalist, we will be notified in the first week of August. If we are selected as a finalist, we will either receive $10,000 or $50,000, and that will be determined based on a public online voting process. So I will actually be on vacation on August 1st, but I'm going to bring my laptop with me so I can check and see if we get that notification. We've got a pretty strong application, I think. So that's the sort of the smallest one. The second one that's out there is also to a private foundation, to the Lowe's Charitable Foundation, for like $300,000 to put into closing the renovation gap here. That was submitted forever ago. That I think is also going to be announced. I think that's going to be announced by the end of June. Here's the big one. I was notified, or I got the notification when I got back to my desk on Monday from my vacation last week. I had submitted through Congressman Courtney's office a $732,000 grant request to close the renovation gap and initiate the site work for the permaculture park. And those figures are based on what we have from the architect for the house and the estimates we have from the permaculture project. Congressman Courtney did accept our application, so it is being passed up to the Appropriations Committee. That does not mean we are guaranteed funding. It does mean it's highly likely that we will get funding. That could be announced as early as the end of September. It's highly unlikely to be announced then. That's the close of the federal fiscal year, but the contentious nature of national politics, they keep passing these continuing resolutions. The aide in the congressman's office said that the latest they've ever seen those go through is the following March. So chances are pretty high that between September and March of next year, we'll close a contract for that money. So that's pretty big news. And then the fourth one, which I just started working on when I got back from vacation, is a round 5 application to the Community Investment Fund through DECD. That is the big one. That's $3.8 some million. And that would be the entire road surface on Main Street, plus the sidewalks. again, proposed the renovation gap closing there and renovations to Swanson Park, you know, the Veterans Memorial Park over here, and this little unnamed memorial up here. I also think that application has its highest chance yet of being approved. This will be the third time I'm submitting it. I've had multiple rounds of conversations with the state agency. I believe they are going to prioritize this application, but I won't know until probably the end of the calendar year. So that's the status on trying to chase the funding. Jocelyn and I are probably going to be going on Winnie sometime between now and our June workshop, because we're going to have the 3 guest speakers coming here live. Someone from Willamette Co-op, with a food co-op they have there. Someone from Hope in Maine, which is a similarly focused incubator program in Providence. And a farmer named Allison Angelini from Full Heart Farm in Ledyard to talk about, you know, what she went through as a startup farmer. So that's exciting. We want to have big attendance for that. So we'll be going on Winnie to talk about that. To promote a survey we currently have open through Connecticut RC&D for farmers, either for active farmers or people who want to explore farming for a living, so that we can gather some data as to what would be useful for them headed into the business unit. So we also want to encourage participation there. And then Maura, do you want to talk about the site walk thing? And then I'll kick it over to Eric.
Sure. Yeah, so I can lead a site walk, because I think that the last meeting, there was a number of people that asked about seeing the site, that haven't seen the site, and just what the plans are. So I don't know if I threw out some dates to Tira, and so it would be like maybe the end of June. And I guess I was thinking that an evening, so that people could participate if they work during the day. But I'm certainly open to suggestions from people. I don't know if we want to say the dates now, Tira, or just like put it out to people in an email.
Yeah, I think I'll probably doodle poll it to the entire group, because we have a small group in the room today.
Okay.
And then I think the Conservation Commission had also indicated that they might be interested in acting as a kind of town sponsor on the sidewalk.
Absolutely.
Which would be beneficial, I think, because although we have a couple of Conservation Commission members who have been attending, I don't think they've been discussing it at their monthly meetings to the same extent. So that's all stuff that's sort of leading into future phases. But we're here to talk about education tonight. So Eric, why don't you introduce yourself, and whenever you're ready to share screen, go on ahead.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Appreciate everybody coming tonight and inviting me in here. I do apologize. I would have my my camera up, but it is broken currently, and I am going to apologize in advance if I sneeze. Pollen is crazy today, and inside I'm still fighting it. So I apologize in advance. My name is Eric Francis. I am one of the founders, and I'm CEO of Trifecta Ecosystems, or as you're going to hear me tonight, refer to ourselves as Farm2X. We are a 12-year-old, about 10-year-old actually, agricultural business in Connecticut. We started as an aquaponic farm, and I'll explain to where we are today. Currently, we have been a partner with the Thompson School District, with Melinda, since about 2019, where we actually wrote a grant together, a USDA farm to school grant with her, to do an aquaponics projects with both Thompson and Putnam school districts. And fortunately, that popped off directly in the middle of 2020. So, so as you can all imagine, that went smoothly and right to plan. So we did adjust, and we'll kind of hit on where we are today. But let me just get into it. I can share my screen. Do this.
Here we go. We can see you.
All right. All right, cool. Yeah. All right. So Farm to X, we design, build, and implement full service farm to school projects, which aim to bring locally grown, healthy foods into school classrooms and to integrate food, agriculture, and STEM education into curriculum. So that's what Farm to X where we do. The 2X is actually we try to connect farming to other industries outside of just agriculture. We believe that farming and food production can be tied to everything, as I bet a lot of people in this room probably think as well. And we want to make sure that farm to school projects are multidisciplinary and so forth. This is myself, Eric Francis, again, one of the CEOs of Trifecta. Again, we are a 12-year-old business and been through the ringer. We started as an aquaponic farm. And over the years, we have both built indoor farms, greenhouses. We built a subscription food business based off of prepared salads that we launched in 2019 and had a close in 2021. And also since the early stages worked with schools to implement both small scale and large scale projects. So I'm just going to go through a couple of pictures. So again, we started an aquaponic farm. When we started aquaponic farming, there wasn't a lot of data and metrics, and we had to actually go out and learn, relearn a lot of things that myself and my two business partners at the time did not know, and it just wasn't out there. And so we actually ended up doing some USDA funded research, which is this 10,000 square foot indoor facility in Meriden, Connecticut was both a test commercial aquaponic farm. It was a commercial kitchen and a research lab. And what we did is that we actually did some research on vertical aquaponics and the viability of it. So along the way, as we were an agricultural business, we actually we didn't know exactly where our business model was getting to. We did know that we wanted to operate a subscription-based farm. We wanted to operate a local-based farm. We had an idea of scaling to probably 5 acres or less in terms of farming operations, and want to go large scale, wanted to keep it small, and wanted to go direct to consumer. Along the way, again, we were doing a lot of educational work, both connecting with schools on special projects. 10 years ago, doing kind of a new aquaponic, hydroponic, or different types of growing in schools was innovative and unique. Now there's way more schools doing it. It's kind of like if you're not doing something, you're kind of missing out. And so we would be a partner on a lot of different projects, some of them being with CREC, when we came to school district, with Thompson, Norwalk, and a few others. And so we were brought in to do different styles of projects just like this. Again, in terms of who we became as a business, we naturally had to both innovate and reach out to industry partners all across the country and the world. We had to learn through failure and also learn to where we had to be very common sense about growing, because at some point when you're doing a food-based business, you have to, it's about the economics of it. How much does it cost to grow? How much does it cost to sell, and so forth? You can't get so romantic about it. But then there's also other aspects of agriculture right now where you have to be very innovative. You have to take new approaches. You have to spend the money on R&D, and you have to potentially risk years of failure to learn a lesson and create a product. And so we went down all those different paths. We know the entrepreneurial kind of life here in Connecticut. We were actually a part of the startup ecosystem here in Connecticut ourselves. I actually have run a podcast since 2015 called CT Startup. We have been a part of a few different economic development projects, like Innovation Places programs put on by Connecticut Innovations and CT Next. And again, we understand that there is a lot of old school wisdom and old school techniques that have gotten us to, our food systems to where we are, but there's also a lot of new innovative kind of ways that we can grow food. And our theory as Trifecta and Farm to X, we actually believe more or less that there's new innovative ways to connect with our communities around food, or maybe we could say old-fashioned ways of connecting with our communities. So part of these images that I want to show you is that these are totally different interaction points around local food ecosystems. To the top left is actually when we brought the Aquaponics Association conference to Connecticut. You wouldn't think that Connecticut has a lot of aquaponic system operators or people who are very well known in the industry, but we do. Just actually in your region, just out in just at Bigelow Brook Farm there in Eastford is one of the kind of most recognized kind of DIY aquaponic guys in the world. And then so we brought industry experts into our facility and did a tour around the area. Top right is another school school that's coming in and doing actually a tour with us. We used to always actually get their hands dirty. They used to help us plant. And at the end, we would actually make them a salad. The bottom left is actually at the that is at the Hartford Marathon, giving out salads to people that finish actually. And the bottom right, which is more important, and I would say that in all of these scenarios we're doing this, is the bottom right is actually customer discovery. Sitting down with people and asking the real questions of how much local produce do you eat? What type of foods do you eat? How much do you go to your local farmer? Why do you go to your local farmer? Why don't you go to your local farmer? And getting the nitty gritty of why people do what they do. I would say that some of our assumptions that we went into the pandemic with probably got ruined, and some probably reinforced and so forth. So it's ever adapting, and you are always kind of reaching out to local community members to just interact with it. Again, no farms, no food. That's actually why in 21, what's interesting about to say, 2020, as we all know, everybody has had challenges and so forth. Not only did we have it with some of the schools that we were implementing projects with, some of them fully shut down, some like Thompson went forward with the projects, which we had to modify. Honestly, Putnam had to take themselves out of the grant because they didn't have enough science teachers, which I'll get to a little bit later in potentially some challenges. But basically, during the pandemic, we did have to come to a realization as a business where we are at and what we're doing. We actually, in 2019, bought a 4.5-acre farm in New Britain, the old Urban Oaks farm. And we actually got that up and running, had that up and running until almost 2021, where we actually had to do some big modifications and adjustments. And so we actually had to shut that down. We're still in limbo right now, trying to get everything back up and running as a farm. But what ended up happening is that all of our schools actually came back with a vengeance to do outdoor learning and to connect to their local foods. So what we ended up doing a lot, and this is a picture of one of the schools that we have in New Haven. This is actually about 2 years ago when we put this garden in. And we have been since then really diving hard into the education aspect of what we're doing and becoming that partner for schools that can do not just build aquaponic systems and hydroponic systems that we were very well known for, but we're also building outdoor educational areas, making very large raised bed gardens, making kind of like mini farms, bringing in kind of fruit and berry bushes into play, and making kind of different settings outdoors to kind of bring students into the fold of local food. And so where we are as a business now, we always had been doing this in the past of working with educators, working with professionals in the industry to create curriculum. For instance, there was a project that we had with CREC in 2017-18, where we were implementing farm to school projects in 7 of their high schools. Over a summertime, we took 5 of their science teachers across their district, put them in our farm in Meriden, and actually they worked with us, and we built a curriculum designed for kind of the higher end high school student, or the upper level, so juniors and seniors. And that was actually focused on both the engineering and designing of aquaponic systems, but also the implementation and management of them. So both the getting one up and running, but also the growing of it, of aquaponics. And so, so what we have done since then is that we've definitely gotten more into working with schools. We've actually been hiring educators more than anybody else in the past few years. I have a full-time educator on staff right now, have a few more positions open currently, and over the summer be looking to bring on some other people for next year's projects. And so what we have been doing is that we've been implementing full-scale farm to school programs with schools, and we're the partner where you can come with us and say, we don't have any money, We have the will and the want to create a large scale farm to school project or integrated farm to school project where we're not I'm speaking from the district level, not only at the high school but also elementary and so forth, and we want to connect the dots in between. We have no money. We want to find money, and then we want to try to get a grant. We can be that partner. We can help you envision it. We can help you find a grant. We're also that partner where you already have a little bit of a project going. You may be on a tail end and you want to expand it. You have money, and we can also be that partner. So we have been on different levels, but the main thing is that we, as you could think about it, we are the champion that doesn't go away. We all know in education, community projects, businesses and people that are at this meeting right now. Champions are the people that push projects forward. There's a lot of champions in every single place that will kind of take the burden of new things and so forth. That champion sometimes leaves. That champion sometimes gets recruited out. We are the partner that actually steps in and becomes that champion, and then also retrains and gets somebody up to speed. So what we do is that technically we plan projects with schools, we implement projects with schools, and we manage projects with schools. That's where we are. A lot of times in the past and currently, just like in this scenario, it overlaps with community projects, economic development projects, and other kind of entrepreneurial kind of programs and so forth. We're happy to integrate into those, and we actually think there's a lot of interesting overlap with that. And I would just say is that as somebody who grew up in Connecticut, went to Connecticut State University or Central Connecticut State University, and made a conscious decision to stay here after college because of the potential of the startup ecosystem and innovation ecosystem and business kind of friendliness in the state. And I would say that we, over the past 10, 15 years, we really have gotten there as a startup ecosystem. There are so many resources, so many potential avenues to connect to real players, not only in Connecticut, but in kind of the innovation ecosystems. So I think that there's a lot of cool things happening there, just aside from the education. And so to give you an idea of just who we are and our big vision, as Trifecta and what we do underneath it, whether it be Weekly Harvest, which was our subscription program, and I'll get how we're kind of coming back to that with a project with a school. But we want a world built on community-driven food systems where people fuel local food production through sustainable, innovative solutions. So we really believe that, and that's actually why we're definitely focused on education in the coming future. Not saying that our farm won't get back up and running, but that will be it will not be centered on a production farm. It will be centered on an educational farming community experience. Similar to this one here. So this is like everything that's happening in this food forest, the permaculture design that you all have. I don't have that yet. I have a much a simpler one at this point, but love all the stuff that you're doing. What's interesting, just kind of on this map, is that basically the two business units that we had, it was Farm 2X, which is again our educational services, where just so you primarily understand, we design and build and install gardening systems, greenhouses and so forth. Then we manage those and operate the maintenance of them. So for instance, over the summertime with all these schools, we actually manage the gardens. And then also we do educational assistance. So in some schools, we are actually running full courses as an educator coming in, kind of an outside educator working with the school. And then in other scenarios, we're coming in one day being a co-educator with teachers in the classroom. And then in other scenarios, we are just working with principals, superintendents, and theme coaches to actually develop curriculum and activities that would surround or be centered on those growing systems. So just to give you an example of us as a partner that we would be happy to be on this project and through Melinda and through the Thompson School District is we did we were a partner and helped write some grants for the past Connecticut kids for CT Grown. And I just probably messed that up as, the actual name of the grant, but that was due. We actually have about 8 schools entered for those. 2 of those we got. Unfortunately, not one that we got with Thompson, but that was actually a shipping container farm that we got with a New Haven school, and then another early childhood care center that we are working with. But what's interesting is that for us as a business, and I think that this is one thing that would go to just the entrepreneurial aspect of this. You're trying to tie into the innovation entrepreneurial side of things, is that there's sometimes a moment and place for entrepreneurial endeavors. And obviously, for some businesses, you have to pick and choose different avenues when you're working on different things. But we as a business, we definitely, again, community driven, and local people like driving what they want is definitely something that we want to strive for. We've always looked for a direct to consumer farming experience. And so what we're doing with the shipping container farm at this New Haven school that we've been working with is it's going to be a mushroom and hydroponic shipping container. So we're going to be doing both oyster and mushrooms and lettuce and other leafy greens that will go into the kitchen. But what we're doing is that we're actually setting it up as a business course, not an agricultural course. Yes, we have a STEM centered curriculum that goes along with it, and they will learn how to grow mushrooms, how to manage those, and so forth. But the real essence of the course that we are implementing with the school is a weekly harvest direct to consumer business course, and that's the easiest way I can describe it right now. And what that will be is we are actually setting up a business, and a lot of the activities that the students are going to be undertaking and the skill sets that they're going to be learning about are more centered on sales and marketing, which two reasons why. One, sales and marketing activities, content creation, branding, music, video, social media tend to be things that the students gravitate to at the high school level, but also marketing and sales skills are skill sets that are very useful in the real world, as we all know, and also are skill sets that even my business professors and deans that I work with at CCSU would admit that you don't need a degree to go get a job in sales and or marketing, as long as you know how to do the activities and you can show that you can do the work. So that and that's kind of one of the crucial things that I just want to point out when getting into some of the things in a second, is that we try to tend to look at what are the other benefits other than the agricultural and food system side of things. Yes, we can connect food to everything, but not everybody is going to become a farmer. Not everybody is a green thumb, but everybody does like to eat, or most people like to eat food. A lot of people like interacting with food. We all interact with food in some way, shape, or form. So we just want to find the different connection points to that, and also to the potential different industries that could, through these kind of projects and programs, we can still open doors for students, not just in agriculture, but potentially in other fields, robotics, AR, AI, and so forth, potentially. So that's kind of where we are. I just want to say is that, my understanding of this project, where we're coming into this. I know I've been in a few meetings with Tyra and kind of understand it. She gave me a bunch of documents, went through it all. It's awesome. Like I said, the food forest, the concept of it, phenomenal. My understanding right now is that we're in the blue sky thinking period of how we tie into education. How do we view bringing students in both at Thompson, but potentially regionally and statewide, and potentially outside of it, just because when thinking about grants, there's always potentially grants that could impact us locally, but if there's an impact outside of Connecticut or regionally or so forth, there may be some opportunity. So that's my understanding, and obviously we can correct me if I'm wrong there, but that's kind of the next few slides, what I'm just going to show and just kind of my thinking around it. A few things that I would just point out, and I know I've been thinking about in terms of what the district is kind of looking for, and Linda, you're gonna have to kind of chime in to correct me again if I'm wrong here. But one of the things that is that with every district, we want to retain students. We don't want students to go outside the district to either private schools or VOAG schools or technical schools and so forth. We want to retain those students. That's obviously very important. And so, and or attract other students to come to Thompson because of a potential career path and so forth. So what I'm going to go over in a second and is more of like where I think some blue sky thinking can be. and just open. I'm happy to be a partner on this, happy to be kind of just a vision kind of collaborator on a lot of these things. Again, I would love to see this type of thing get up and running, whether we were a part of it or not. But again, going forward, I would say that a couple of things that I'm going to just put in as assumptions or let you know about my assumptions that I have in what I'm going to make is a couple different things. One, we want to attract students to this, or we want to attract schools, educators to this site to use as a resource, both to come to or to use it as a way to connect to their educational experience. So that's one assumption. The second assumption is that it's difficult to get to Thompson. Not difficult, but it's not highly populated. So any field trips that I think about a half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour is definitely stretching it, right? That becomes an entire day. But a half an hour or less is kind of where field trips come into play. So that's another thing. Two, the other assumption would be that from the entrepreneurial innovation accelerator kind of bit of this, I don't know if we consider that underneath the educational track of these workshop series over the next few months. But the other assumption is that it wouldn't be reinventing any wheels of innovation kind of ecosystem driven work. It would be relying and connecting to the other ones that have been happening in the state, especially ones that are the innovation ecosystems, which I assume you've been connecting to, the one down in like New London area. But again, Reset in Hartford, down in New Haven are some good ones. So I would just say is that we're going to leverage the innovation ecosystem to do a lot of that work, but use this area to put our spin on it. So that's the third assumption. So I guess I'll go quickly through these things, and then we can stop and I'll take a drink of water and maybe sneeze, and we can answer some questions. So basically I kind of figure of a multidisciplinary educational approach. So this is definitely district-led, maybe school-led in terms of where the experience should be. But I actually think of schooling and education as like it's a lifelong experience. Like we forget that you have to learn throughout your life. I mean, I had to relearn the nitrogen cycle and the ammonia cycle to understand aquaponics. I'm learning every day. I'm gonna butcher the quote, but the more things you know, the more ignorant you feel, or the less you know. So that's basically, yes, we were gonna put this into the pathway of career paths at this high school level for K through 12 education and so forth. But I think there's an opportunity for like community education or lifelong learning education, that kind of stuff, which I definitely got the vibe that this project definitely want to hit on. So first one is kind of like VR, AR experiences. These are kind of like some things to think about. Like this is a pretty intensive permaculture operation, renovation project, and so forth. So like VR field trips, VR workshops, virtual workshops, and so forth. One thing, I guess, the other assumption that I don't know if I would say it's an assumption, but it would be a theme or maybe a route to take in moving forward at a certain point. And I guess let me try to explain myself. In entrepreneurship, the greatest entrepreneurs, or the thing or one of the pieces of advice you always hear is that you gotta love the journey. Like you gotta love the work, not just the end point. Because every time you reach that goal, you get the company funded, you reach the milestone with the product, you sell the business, you do this, you do that. At some point, you start back over and you say, well, oh, okay, well, what's next? Like what's that? And so I think there's the loving of the journey in entrepreneurship and education and every aspect of whether you're a content creator, whether it's picking through antiques and finding the gold mine and reselling it or something. The passion and just kind of the loving of the journey, not just the outcome of it, right? So the reason why I'm going to say, I don't know if it's an assumption or not, but I would maybe as a theme here, I think there's something to making the journey the thing, like making and this is a part of the workshop. So I'm like, I don't go too heady with it. And because we're talking about, there's community members in the room right now. There's other partners on the phone call, on the Zoom call. So we're already doing it. But I think there's something to, one, obviously really document the entire thing. I mean, the video and the installation of this thing is going to be incredible, how everything gets planted, the whole stuff. But the documentation and actually the journey, I think, can be part of the overarching educational experience. Because one thing that is lost on students these days, and it's just a tangent. I think that students these days and young kids these days are like excellent activists and advocates for themselves and advocates for the community. Like they're willing to get out there, but I think they sometimes forget that kind of like ideas are nothing without execution. So like activism without follow through, and I want to change without like, here's a solution, but like you go do it, not me. I think is being lost. And so again, if we can include the educational experience, or wrap the educational experience around the next 10 steps of this process, to get to the actual food forest, I think would add another layer to this, which might be interesting. A little bit, again, that goes to, again, identification apps, learning modules. These things kind of get into some of the community learning side of things. Citizen science projects I've always been fascinated about. And I think that there's something here to do something with that. The environmental monitoring, again, there's a few companies in Connecticut that have created some sensors for ag tech. Bigelow Brook Farms, Rob Torcellini over in Eastford, he's an inventor, not just an aquaponics enthusiast, and also, you know, kind of an IT guru. So he has sensors that he's developed that could easily do stuff, and actually students, they're so easy to work with that students can actually build it, program it, and so forth, and learn that side of it as well. Again, some different climate impact studies and water quality testing, just to name a few. And then the capstone projects for students. So this one's actually one where I think would be very interesting from a community level, just in Thompson, and trying to get students from around the area, but also potentially a way to bring in students from all across the state and almost across the line in Rhode Island. If you can use the actual location as an asset to do a capstone project, students can maybe apply to kind of use the facility, or, you know, they have a thesis or so forth and so on. They can use the place as a capstone location and kind of a resource to do something in the real world. And I guess maybe like preface that, like, I want to make sure that students are doing real world things, not just kind of doing stuff on paper, because I know that's where I personally learn the most. And that's kind of one of my theses in the work that we do. Also, research and development, open it up to UConn, ECSU, obviously other professors, to, hey, here's a location for you to do research on, and so forth. Obviously, the ecosystem management. I think the running of the facility, just like we do with some of our aquaponic and hydroponic systems at schools, in certain classes, the tasks of maintaining the system is the thing, and tracking that, and what happens with it, and so forth. That is the thing, and that is a useful skill set, and also helps with understanding how these ecosystems work. So again, management of that, and then the community engagement, obviously the educational outreach and workshop and training. So these ones, again, how do you use this location for the outer community of Thompson and so forth to be able to benefit from this? I would also say throughout all of these, going back to one of my assumptions that we're going to reach out, I think, and I probably should just maybe had a slide on this. I think the main driver for this being an educational beacon for permaculture, local food ecosystems, food forests, local food kind of economic development projects, and so forth. I basically think it needs to be a magnet for industry professionals to come and speak to. So I think that one of the biggest things about this, and this goes back to my comment about the educational experience at the New Haven schools, is, hold on, just got a warning, my battery might die on my computer, so let me plug it in. And this goes back to the comment about the New Haven schools, is that the marketing of this to the community and getting it in front of people and getting it in front of them enough times for them to it be inseared in their brains. And I'm actually kind of mean like outside of the Thompson area, because again, a lot of the people that this project have connected with, relied on, and or kind of benefited from, maybe outside of that area. I think that the sales and marketing, content creation, And kind of the visual assets of this will be one of the driving forces of whether like the success of it. So using this as a magnet to bring in these experts to get their opinions, to then have that be a resource to the community at large to learn from, and again tying back to the lifelong learning kind of themes and so forth. That's kind of our blue sky thinking initially about this, and kind of just what we've kind of seen and so forth. In terms of us as a company, again, we I've told Melinda this. I won't take anybody from Thompson, but science teachers are in high demand across the state and everywhere else. But I can tell you what, I know that there's not a shortage of science teachers that want to work on this type of work. And I would say that there's a yearning for a lot of science teachers that are also getting out of the industry. A lot of the people that I'm working with are actually retired 25, 30-year vets that still love the teaching, just don't like being within the walls of the schools and so forth, that gravitate towards this and are thrilled to be involved. So there is definitely a yearning from those types of people, like those industry people, to be connected. So I am going to just realize that was 45 minutes. I wish somebody would have rang a bell or something. You should have given me like a 20 minutes. That was insane. Sorry about that. And I will stop. I will stop there. So
Oh, Eric, I have a question.
yeah.
So it's Melinda.
Yep.
So next year, the high school, as part of our portrait for graduate students have to complete a capstone project. And so would it be somewhat feasible to write a farm to school planning grant and connect some of the work that's going to potentially be happening at 65 Main Street? We have actually a class that's going to run to support kids through their capstone project. So we have one first semester, but the second semester, that grant's due in October, November. If there was a way that we could work with you to align the curriculum or align some projects that would be connected to 65 Main, even though they're in the process of, I guess, beginning the journey with the grounds. I just wonder about putting in a planning grant this fall, having you help us with that, and then connecting to our capstone project.
Yeah. So the short answer is yes. The long answer is, in terms of I think this type of a project, and I know Amanda's on here, and some other people probably that have done are connected to grant tours and so forth like that. Like, this project has a lot of potential opportunity for different grants. I think that it's broad enough of a mission to allow for different things to happen. So in terms of that grant, whether, I'm not going to speak on exactly how we write that grant or what we put in for that, but yes, what I would say is that from a capstone perspective, I would argue it's better to even not start with funding. And part of the capstone is to get it to a point where it can be funded. One of the things about this that students should learn, especially students that are getting into college and so forth, is that sometimes as an adult, sometimes as like in a business, you get a project to a certain point and then you pass it off, or you can only get to a point based on certain time limits, and then it gets to a certain point and then it's somebody else takes it. So I think that is a natural progression with some of these capstone projects, where it's like it can get to a certain point. We can focus on one aspect of the 65 Main project while still tying into everything else. And kind of, I think Tyra and I kind of like talked about it, like sometimes you're stacking these projects on top of each other and building like this massive kind of multi-level, multidisciplinary project, pulling funds from different kind of funding sources to get different pieces done. So I think there's a multitude of different ways we can go about that, but the short answer is yes, we can write a capstone based on this, and just be depending on what the focus of it is, because as you know, you want to put some sort of blinders on the project. You can't have it so open-ended because it's too much. So you do want to put some sort of blinders on it.
And right before I left for vacation, and Melinda, I think you were copied in on this, but Jocelyn or Amanda from Connecticut RC&D had sent me a link to what is really a series of interrelated grants through, must have been USDA. And some of the ones that are due later in the year, in the fall or in December, did seem to have some potential for us to start writing for funding of the actual programming or creation of the curriculum. I think the one that I thought had the most legs was one that was more adult and continuing ed related. You know, in some senses, it's a little premature because we're still like in one planning grant and then we'll be, you know, throwing it against the wall right away. But the worst thing that happens is that you don't get the grant and then you learn from that application and you put it through again. So I do think we're already thinking in those terms. So for my interest here, and I definitely want to hear the questions from the other folks in the room or online. My interest is sort of in example curricula, because I think what we're trying to wrap what I, as the person who's going to be working on the master plan, regardless of whether we're describing something in a grant right away, that master plan obviously supports all those future grant opportunities, and the specificity, any specificity that we can show in what we are proposing to teach at what level of education, be it K through 12, high school only, or continuing ed. Those are the details that I think grantors latch onto, is that which is specific and describable. So for my purposes, that's why I'd like to know. I think also for the purposes of the folks in the room, I think most of the people here probably don't think about designing curricula every day, but they are stakeholders in this project. So, you know, helping them to envision what those things look like when they actually get up and running.
Yeah. So what I can do, I'm gonna stop sharing and just put another one up real quick. Or just okay. So just quickly before and I can send these out. So like one, we have like a bunch of different types of curriculum, and I will have to say, just like, and Melinda kind of understands this too a little bit. Every school kind of modifies our curriculum to their learning objectives for their classes. We've actually found that we went in with full curriculum units done. Definitely different for this maybe scenario, but like full curriculum done, like half year and full year programs. And it was actually more like teachers were more just like taking pieces of it because it's hard to put in a whole new curriculum to a district or a whole new class sometimes. So we've been more of a piecemeal kind of developing stuff and then kind of being able to take it apart. But right here, for instance, like this is the weekly Harvest Business Experience course that we're looking to do. Can everybody see that, by the way? Right? Okay.
They should be able to now.
Yeah. So, you know, obviously cultivation knowledge and everything, but focusing on marketing and branding, sales and customer interaction, business operation and strategy, financial literacy, sustainable practices, and then community building and networking. Here's like, we have curriculum, but we're actually going for like the outcomes. Like, what are the activity? What are the outcomes? What are the objectives? Like how we wanted to definitely do this project based because we want them to do like real world things. So, which again, that's why I would argue the capstone, regardless for this, like we can make a capstone at any point, even without a grant, because that's the whole point. Like you're planning something out, you're going through the process. So here's the different outcomes, the objectives, and so forth. And then we're going to be basically diving. We're right now in the background building this out completely. I mean, our mushroom curriculum right now for this experience is, you know, about 100 pages. So for us, we develop it for kind of the specific organization or school and how it kind of melds in with their academic activities. So for here, we would just say it's like what's the focus, where are we going to, and do we need a hard curriculum, or do we need like workshop series or kind of activities or events or different other educational experiences, not just a curriculum. So that makes sense.
Charlie, you have a question for
Yes,
you to run?
excuse me, I have another meeting to go to, but I wanted to make an open statement to the people that are working on the curriculum for this project. If you don't know about this work, this is called the Foxfire books. There were 10 of them that were written that dealt with things like preserving fruits, preserving vegetables, cooking on a wood stove, how to slaughter a hog and smoke it. There's a lot of stuff in here, and what Eric just said about the thought of reaching beyond the town of Thompson. There's things in here, how you make oak baskets for when you go pick berries, things, there's a lot of stuff in here. I really urge you, before you go reinventing wheels. And if the town, if the library, if the project doesn't have this as a resource, I'm gonna suggest that EDC buy one set or an electronic copy. Lots of good stuff in.
Thanks, Charlie. Good luck
No,
at your other
perfect.
meeting. Yeah, other folks, you guys have been great conversationalists and contributors, so, thoughts based on what Eric said, questions about curricula, suggestions such as Charlie's, I mean, what are your responses to what you just saw and heard?
I thought it was all pretty interesting, like, the idea of having somebody to organize and keep the curriculum going and make sure that it doesn't just fall apart after it's created. Having a real structure behind it is awesome. You certainly got my attention when you started talking about VR and AR. It's right up my alley. I like electronics. I think that's a great idea. But you could use that to use our construction and garden to create virtual programs that other students can learn from and use. So if that can work financially with our program, and it sounds like it could, because they have lots of different options for that. Sounds great.
Anybody else, just thoughts and observations from what we heard? Don't
I
be
like
shy.
that he, sorry, did I interrupt somebody?
No.
I like that Eric mentioned that having the students involved in this stage, sort of before we get to maybe a full curriculum, having them involved with the success of the planning side of it and then perhaps implementation so that there's some ownership there and real life skills involved. I find that in my own experience, yes, I've been to school, but it's all of the random odd jobs that I had for all of those years that really bring something to the table, so I feel like getting real life experience, real deliverables out there would make a huge impact on their success post school.
So that brings us to something that we discussed in the last meeting, which was meshing with the cycles of the actual academic calendar. I mean, we are practically in June. There's no
Right.
student going to be coming down to do anything in the next 6 weeks, however long they're in school. So going back to what we discussed last time, Melinda, if we wanted to somehow incorporate students from TMHS in this project in fall semester, is that feasible?
Too late.
Too late. Spring semester?
Spring semester, that can be a possibility. But the reality is kids have already picked their classes, they're set, we just finished the schedule. We drop in classes usually in January that are, the half year classes. So January would make sense, especially if you started to talk about the planning of all of this and what their role would be in all of it. They're going to need guidance, they're gonna need a teacher, currently my teaching staff couldn't pick that up. I know working with Eric, I would kind of lean on, we have a lot of industry leaders coming into the school to teach classes like CNA, like fire science. We don't own the teacher per se, we pay for their time to come in, and that has been working well. And so, if there was a way to start the planning and write a grant and be able to compensate perhaps Eric or one of his colleagues that he works with to come in and kind of start that work going. Then the following year, you can build those classes, because we will know where we're at. It would almost be like we're building the plane in the air, while we're implementing that class for the second semester of next year. But that will give us a roadmap for the following courses.
You know, I love to build planes in the air while I'm flying them. Just call me Denver.
That's
no,
why we're
don't-
on the call.
So I'll tell you what immediately springs to mind based on Eric's presentation, some things that Dan said, this idea that, you know, nothing's happening earlier than January. How do we make it something that can utilize resources that we already have? Now, let's assume, and this is an assumption, right, which may prove to be false, but let's assume that this congressional award, which, although not a sure thing, is certainly looking very favorable. Let's imagine that that funding is confirmed before the end of this calendar year. Not at all impossible. The piece that grabbed Dan, that Eric introduced in one of the slides that I hadn't even really thought about, was the idea of the documentation of the project through the marketing, the AR. So we're not really working in the agricultural sphere yet, but those students in the business stream have a task, have a semester project that they can work on together. We know that Jeff Bolte, for example, although he travels a lot, he does drone photography, right? And does some of that piece. Who are the other players locally who are invested in the project philosophically, who can provide those skills? And again, that can go back to this connection we're trying to build with the Thompson Business Association, who can be essentially the vocational partners in something that maybe we could throw together in a shorter time frame than a full-fledged curriculum. So I'm just going to lay that out on the table for people to consider.
From a fundraising perspective, obviously, there's a ton of work that's been done on the grant side of things, but thinking of a longer term sort of maintenance level thing away from education. A project like that, a video-based project, is a great thing for a campaign or any fundraising to see that those steps happening and being completed. I think that donors would be interested.
Oh, yeah, that's goals, so that's market goals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Other thoughts, other observations? Dr. Perotti Brown, educator at large.
I do apologize that I haven't heard much.
We're talking about curriculum building, so I'm asking you.
Love building a good curriculum.
I think somebody from the meeting down in the, I recognized her when she moved away. In this case, no. Anybody else? Other thoughts? Greg, you're brand new to this. What do you?
Drinking the fire hose here, a lot of really interesting stuff, and certainly if there's room for forestry or arboriculture to be part of it, I be very interested in seeing those be as kind of underrepresented and not thought of typically in agriculture as much as some of the other more typical things. Would love to see those included both for both, you know, potentially for students who might want to get into those fields, but also folks who might be looking for new careers or to get involved with those fields. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there, and I'm excited to kind of see how some of this plays out and continue to weigh in.
And you are new to most of the people here, so I'm going to put you a little bit on the spot just to have you introduce yourself and tell everybody here what it is that you do.
Yeah, Greg Corso, I'm a certified arborist, own a tree farm and brand new plant healthcare business here in town. All that just kind of started up this year. I have a background in forestry and arboriculture, spent 5 or 6 years in tech startups as an operations and launch and expansion specialist, mostly in transportation and urban mobility. So kind of have a really broad background in some of this and bridging technology. One of my goals right now is kind of as a one-man show to prove that technology can make it very, I don't want to say easy, but kind of solve some of the challenges of running a one-man operation, kind of specialty agriculture and forestry work that I'm doing.
Yeah, and so just that forestry thing, you know, creating pathways for kids in Thompson, we have to have our, right? We already have BOAG next door. But what is it special about the programming that we're gonna bring to Fremont Memorial High School? We don't have that thread anywhere.
I see those niches and, you know, we talk about mushroom cultivation. That's one of the areas I've gotten into recently. Very popular, very kind of buzzwordy stuff now, and the first person latches onto it and can do something with it is gonna be able to reap the benefits.
I know, but we didn't get the grant, right?
Well, that was a grant.
Yeah,
And that particular grant was specific to shipping container farms, which we know they're not gonna continue. However, that CT Grown or whatever that program in general continues. So that's probably still an eligible activity. They just don't have that specific thread. And I would be surprised if they don't continue to award those here and there. And as just for the people who are hearing about this for the first time, the Department of Agriculture had a one-time grant to schools to fund the installation of shipping container farm units on campus. And Eric and Melinda and I discussed it whenever that was, last fall, I think. Eric wrote for one, unfortunately was not successful. But in that conversation, one of the things we were talking about, and I think it's another strain that we need to keep in mind, is how profitable mushroom farming is, right? If you go into a Wegmans or a Whole Foods where they're selling, you know, fresh mushrooms, they're like $19 a pound. Sometimes they're more. And I can tell you, it doesn't cost that much to grow them.
Especially for like really good stuff,
Right. So, and a relatively clean product, although nothing is perfectly clean in agriculture. And Jocelyn and Amanda and I just went down to a professional mushroom grow operation in, where was that, Stonington?
Yeah, I don't know if that's officially, yeah.
Yeah.
So Seacoast and mushrooms.
Seacoast Mushrooms, fantastic operation, and you can see how efficient it is once you sort of get them going.
A lot of energy use for the, sterilization process.
Oh, yeah, yes, he's got an autoclave.
Honestly, that's right. I couldn't think of the word for a second. I think Amanda might have had something.
Was that, or is that this silly thing here? Amanda, did you have something you wanted to toss in?
I didn't have anything to add. Josie, if you're saying, ask me a question, it's hard to hear you. I think you're further from the mic.
Sorry, I must have missed it.
No,
I just saw the, circle lighting up, so I thought that someone had something to say.
No, it's probably just background noise. That happens all the time. But anyway, so getting back to that, one of the challenges that we are definitely gonna have, no matter what with this project, is going to be how it sustains itself at every level. Both the adult education, the scholastic education, the business support, you know, Workshare thing. There has to be at some point income from this program. So I do think of things like what you're doing over there as maybe a person who can
Well,
help
the startup
advise.
costs are almost nothing for it,
Yeah.
and so it's a way that if mushrooms are something that's interesting to people, there are alternatives to these big, sexy freight farms or shipping container farms and autoclave kind of operations where you can still get that experience at the price of $30 for 5 pounds of sawdust inoculant.
Right, yes, and so what you're talking about, again, to be clear for the people who don't know, is not the shipping container farms, but actual inoculation of logs with beeswax, sawdust,
And
and
there's a million different growing
Yeah.
mediums. Mushrooms will decompose or grow on anything natural. So there's a bunch of ways to do this that don't necessarily need that high startup cost investment.
Guys could probably help with that, because that, you know, if you're gonna do something like that, because there was a mushroom farm that was down in Columbia, Connecticut, quite a few years, and, you know, there was common over the table.
That's not there anymore?
I think it shut down a couple of years,
Okay.
but it was there for 20 or 30
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
They shut down because of high energy costs. It's actually owned. They're doing a bunch of agricultural stuff there now. You're talking about the old mushroom factory, right? The Franklin Mushroom Factory.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's shut down. But I think it's actually owned by a Chinese company right now.
So Eric, and that takes us back to a little bit more of what you had in some of your slides about some of the other things that your company specifically offers, which is, you know, who maintains the projects when the kids are out of session, and some of the logistics around that.
Yeah. And so I actually, what's interesting is that I actually think like answering the questions of who maintains it, who does this, who does that, like that's actually like part of the capstone project. A lot of that stuff is just getting in front of people who want to be a part of it. One thing I just want to keep in mind, and even this is even with like students who are looking to do the capstones, we're still in like the championship development phase. We need to develop like the champions that are going to sustain it for the next 2 to 5 years. And that's the thing that I think is going to be pretty necessary for these types of projects to succeed, is that you need to find a couple of people that are willing to do that. They have incentives to do that, whether it be the experience, they have an outcome, they're paid, there's something, they're a staunch community member, right? Like there needs to be some sort of long-term, because if there's not long-term commitment, it doesn't work. Now, I think you can set up many activities, both educational and community experiences that don't require people to put that effort in or the long-term commitment, but they can just have like an experience. I think that's also crucial. But right now, I would say you're in the championship development phase. Now, on that note, in terms of revenue generation, I actually, my other assumption maybe that I didn't state was that those activities could potentially generate revenue. So the AR field trip experience could for sure be a revenue generator selling to other schools, like selling a service and kind of an interaction point. Field trips, obviously there's that. So I would almost kind of, is there a way to make that revenue generating as an educational asset for both, the region and state, at large, but again, another ramble, so sorry.
So that's more pushing towards like middle school into high school, right? To start kids on that. You know, if you're looking for like 5 years, the kids doing it for 5 years.
I certainly would rule it out.
High school to college. I would actually argue like a high school student that's going to go to a community college or is going to go to Eastern or UConn, perfect fit. I think students underestimate going into college with a project that they're working on, like an actual bigger thing. Because I know for me, it was really easy to get good grades when I just connected all my outside of the class work to what I was doing in class,
Yeah, the point of developing the career pathways at Turlock Memorial High School is because we have a good population of our students that graduate and they have no direction, and many of them take classes at Connecticut State, which is QB, right? And so and we're pushing career pathways down to the middle school. So if we can attract middle school kids to be interested, high school kids, and then thinking about those students that are going to the local community college, which very often they have no direction even going there. They haven't decided what it is that they are interested in. But keeping those kids connected to the school, that's the one thing many of those students that go out of community college want to reach back and stay connected to Turlock. And I've got kids stepping up to take over the theater program that are going to be alum. And so sure, we want to turn it back over to them because they'll stay in the community. So I get what Eric is trying to say, sustainability and stretching it over the years. And there is a good pathway for that. Being able to push down at middle school and then even reaching out to those kids after they graduate.
And, again, speaking about the middle school connection, and this is something that you And Kathleen and I discussed when we were working on the P O C D a couple of years, that the critical point where our district loses students is in the transition from middle school to high school. That seems to be where they drop off for the VOAG program. Maybe they're going, some of them to private schools or other opportunities. So that if you could, it seems to me that, yes, Ray, that it's logical if you push that to like that final year of middle school, that creates the continuity to stay in the district.
So eighth grade students can take high school courses now, and they get high school credit for that, so they can get a leg up and take more courses and electives at the high school. That's free, doesn't charge cost the district anything. But we're reaching down to seventh grade now, so we have seventh graders going up and doing a class in culinary, because they don't understand the opportunities that the district's developing. But we know now that targeting just that eighth grade class was foolish in a way, that we have to start targeting kids and getting them interested in sixth and seventh grade. So we're developing career pathways, like we have a relationship with Electric Boat. And so we have a big welding program going to the high school. But what we're starting at the middle school is the Sea Birch thing, which is submersibles, which is related to the engineering part of maybe working at EV. So educators who Electric Boats and area are planning to do some work with our kids, but we're trying to push that down even like into seventh grade, into sixth grade, because we want them to develop some interest. And then stay with us, because, you know, Alice and the Boac, they have wonderful programs. I'm not gonna knock it at all. But, you know, we want our kids to stay home, and many of them want to, because it's a small community. They want to stay with their friends, but until we stop pulling things down and getting kids interested. So this project, I mean, it would be ideal to get some middle school kids interested, because now they're gonna carry that to the high school and stay with it for a long time. And then of course turn it over to their lower classmates and keep it going. And Eric's right, things can die on the vine very easily.
I have seen it happen.
Projects I've started and then they just die. And so you have to keep it going.
So it seems to me that in the short term, at the very least, the three of us, and obviously with as many stakeholders as is practical, in this development phase, we should be looking at two things. And one is trying to create something that for spring semester 2025 can involve the students in that marketing, branding, promotion, AR field. And then in parallel, really start to talk about, again, what is the ultimate curriculum that we're going to be describing, that we are actively going to be seeking at least initial grant funding startup costs, if not trying to find some ongoing funding mechanism.
Every successful program that we've implemented has always started with grounded with a consultant that understands the business, or understands the pathway. We were lucky, we got that for free from Electric Boat, but not every project started that way. And so we always leaned on some grant seed money to connect with a consultant so that we can keep that work going. So,
and the other connection I hear here is what Greg is saying about low tech, high value production of, which is also agricultural, doesn't even really need this facility up and running in the short term, but can start to create the shape of some of these other programs.
yeah, and from a business perspective, who's going to teach it at the building level? You know, what that curriculum will look like, what are the assessments, how is it going to be graded, what kind of credit can we, you know, all those things start to flow around in my head. But it can be simple, start a science class.
So one thing I would just put out there as a potential career path that I would probably argue nobody is going to go after because it wouldn't hit. In project management might be an interesting career path to take, because that is applicable in every single field. And I would argue I run into it very often that I just need another project manager that can handle different styles of projects and understands how to move things forward. So I know there's like PMP certifications and some other, there are degrees in project management. So just a thought, and because it could be valuable.
Anybody have any other observations, thoughts, questions, ideas for next steps?
I got, well, you might think,
That's why we asked you to come, right?
well, like I said, with the younger kids, if you could get the younger ones and not start them right off with the business part of it, get them with the hands dirty part of it, that might keep them, interested as they get older to get into, the business part of, the marketing and all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's my first time coming here, I sit back and I'll shut up.
No, that's not what this is for, yeah.
It's interest first, and kids getting dirty with whatever the project is and really getting excited about it, and then learning the other things that go.
Little worm composting. Anybody else? I mean, we don't have to use our full 2 hours, but we're all here, we're dialed in. Maura, Amanda, anything on your end that you're observing or listening?
Yeah, I guess I would just say I think all of this is Eric's very knowledgeable in this field. You have the right team being pulled together here with his experience in curriculum and training and working with youth. One thing I think to think about is in terms of skill building, not everyone's an entrepreneur, not everyone's a project manager. We need to train people to be farm workers, people who are skilled and trained to go work on an existing farm. And not everyone's meant to be an owner, and a lot of owners are scrambling for good skilled workers. So, whether it's a college path or it's not, after high school, I think you need to think about that in your curriculum, that it could go either way.
By the way, Amanda, second that on like the labor side of things. I would argue that talent is like a big thing, and that's both from the laborer all the way up. Big thing to focus on because across many industries it's an issue. So I would like very much second that.
Yeah.
I wonder if there is a way. So we've talked about this first class that will go through the facility, hopefully like ag startups or people interested in doing something at the facility. Is there a way to start with younger folks who maybe aren't college tracked? They work at 65 Main through their education, through working with the business owners who are there, and streamline employment to those businesses once they're out of school. And so maybe it's not the first group, this is down, we're talking years down the road, but maybe there's essentially they get the training they need to then kick off their career, or at least the beginning of their career with some of the folks at.
So not totally dissimilar, I think, to what you're starting to do with Sarah.
Yes, exactly, I was just gonna say that.
Yeah.
Involved with the, where she's opened up the make and take kind of meal service, now she's tapping into our culinary kids. So now, it's not gonna be an internship, they're gonna actually get work.
Right.
And so, but she wants the skill labor. Go back to, I think it's Amanda that said the skill labor, which they don't want culinary 1 students, they want kids in second, right? That kind of, yeah, and the more of that we could do in that. Not everybody is even going to go, and from our graduating classes, not everyone even goes to a community college, nor should that be the thrust, right? We want them to choose a career that they're gonna be doing every day. And so we have got to establish those pipelines for kids to do that. We have kids that are interested in agriculture and apple forest. We think it is just very interested in that, because to me, it seems like kids have never thought about that. And then I think about those kids that take environmental piece on, AP environmental science. I think they've never even thought about that as a career.
I'll tell you, the other thing that just reminded me of is, and a few people may know about this. Do you know about the book that was published a few years ago called The Lost Words?
No.
So it's a beautiful book. And this is probably almost 10 years old, this book now. It was, there was an edition of a children's dictionary. You might have heard about this one. A prominent children's dictionary where they notably removed words as being not relevant to children's experience. And those words were things like acorn.
Oh,
And right, so they were predominantly words that involved the natural world. And in their place, they put words that were in more common usage, which were more tech-oriented words. And the job skills that Amanda's referring to and we're starting to talk about here, to me, and was part of what inspired my early ideas about this project, are those things. They are lost professions because the emphasis when we talk about STEM, and which Eric correctly says is STEAM, or STEAM, if you want to include agriculture and arts, so many people just don't even focus on that at all. Like, you know, early editions of Sesame Street, they were always showing, you know, people working in factories and working on farms. And, but as you get further into the educational universe, the focus is on having kids who are competitive in the modern fields, but the pre-modern fields, if you were, tend to be those that are actually basic to our everyday life. We could live forever without hedge fund managers, right? The entire universe would continue to spin without office managers. But, you know, no farms, no food. Good luck to you if nobody's growing food. Good luck to you if you don't know how to build, if nobody knows how to build a house. And that definitely gets lost. And again, one of the reasons that I started thinking about this focus for that building, right? Because my problem just started with an empty building that we own. And how do you put it to use is, how are we in Thompson, if not uniquely, prominently located? Right. And we know from all those public engagement exercises that the things that the community at large values tend to hearken back to those traditions, the agricultural history of the town, the fact that at its heyday, it was an industrial hub where people worked with their hands. And that latter thing is never coming back in the way that it used to be, right? Manufacturing doesn't work that way anymore. But the notion of being physically connected to your profession, I think is something that resonates very strongly here, and that you are working on at the high school with these various career paths. It doesn't mean that the kids who do it are dummies or don't go to college. It's not an either or. It certainly can be a both and to allow those kids to sort themselves out in a fuller environment, I think is the opportunity we really have.
When our community doesn't know after looking up that schedule yesterday, even though we have 210 kids in that school, the opportunities that they have to pick different, you know, career pathways and experiences, you know, is pretty phenomenal, what's there. But I'm always looking for the next thing, and this just lends itself to to an area that we have started to scratch the surface on with the aquaponics, and you know, we don't have a willing science teacher, and that kind of goes back to what Eric said about sustainability and keeping things moving forward. But starting with that video, we have people teach video, right? And I have a business class, so, I mean, those two things, I'm just sitting down with those teachers and seeing if they're willing to develop curriculum over the summer, because that's their window of time to develop curriculum, and then put something in play for a course. It would be a private class, we'd run private classes. See how that goes.
So I guess those are our action items for the summer. You, Melinda, Eric and I is, you know, teasing those few things out, the spring 2025 class concept, which we can develop with the assumption that the funding will come through, and then if it doesn't, we'll just put it off a semester or whatever. The description of a grantable curriculum. And where else were we? There was something else on that list and it just flew out of my head.
The networking too, and you know, thinking about connectivity with adult ed eventually, beyond just the schools. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody, anything else at this point at 7:30? Everybody have enough pizza, seltzer, cookies? I am okay to cut it after an hour and a half. I will remind you guys that, the meeting on the 26th of June, so workshop number 9 is going to be here in the library. We would like a lot of attendance. We will do it as a hybrid in person and Zoom, but it would be very nice to have people in these chairs and in this audience, maybe people who haven't been involved yet that you think would be interested. And again, the speakers are going to be from the Willimantic Food Co-op, from Hope in Maine, which is again a comparable kind of incubator program, and from a young professional farmer talking about, you know, how she and her family set up and the challenges that they faced and the kinds of supports they could have used. And keep your ears peeled for when Jocelyn and I at least, and Maura, maybe you too, but we can talk about that online. We'll go in and promote it on Winnie. Look for the farmers survey. If you, I'll push it to our agriculture commission. But if you know people working in agriculture who are in the region, but maybe outside the town, please push it to them. We want
To just, the survey isn't. So RCND, we say ag producers and we say rural ag businesses. So it's not just people growing the food, it could also be people doing, you know, jams and jellies, or they service the, chips for the growing of mushrooms or whatever it is. So it's not just food producers. So when you're sharing that, think of that too, because there's people within the ag industry that, so we opened it up a little bit more if they're interested in joining that incubator.
right, and some, at least one of the questions involves, you know, a multiple choice of what types of learning opportunities would be valuable to you, either as a working farmer, an aspirational farmer, a value-added food producer. So we've started to get responses. How long do we have it open for?
There's no close date on the survey itself. I would have to look back on our notes on what we decided for our close date.
Amanda, do you remember?
I think we're going to keep it open till right before the June meeting, so we could collect the data and have some semblance of where we were at.
Okay.
Yeah, so we probably have at least 3 or 4 more weeks on that, and we're gonna digest the data that comes in.
Did you just have your hand up, Marcia? I thought I saw a hand over there.
What's the, I don't know what that is it farmer survey?
Yeah, it's a survey, and actually your business as an herb farm, I think, would be an appropriate, you would be an appropriate responder there, so I'll forward that to you.
It should be, I believe, posted on our.
I came to some of the listservs I'm on already.
Oh, it's on our social media. So I'll post it on our website with the Thompson 65 Main logo we've been working with. And if you want to direct people to that rather than the crazy long Google link.
Yeah, and we put it online while I was on vacation, so I haven't gotten around to putting it on the town stuff yet, but
Okay.
I'll upload it to all the town stuff.
Yeah.
And then, again, I will send out to the full list of participants, which is like 50, 60 people, a doodle poll with some date options for anybody who's interested in the site walk for the future permaculture park. So it's gonna be sometime probably late June, early July, in the late afternoon, early evening to accommodate for people's work schedules. And Maura has said that she'll lead that, which is fantastic. So the people can get a sense of how the property is, because you have no real good, clear sense of it when you're standing on the actual 65 parcel. When you get down there, it's quite nice. And you can see sort of how far it goes and where the wet areas are and all that stuff. Yes, Ray?
That's what a garden is, right?
Well, so the garden is 65 Main itself. The 3.5 acres for the permaculture park, that's technically the back half of Riverside Park. So the town also owns it, but strictly speaking, it's a different parcel, and it's down, like if you walk towards the river from that garden, it's quite a drop off. So the access is a little tricky. You've got to kind of wind your way around. But yes, it's nice down there.
The garden, something, just.
Yeah. And fingers crossed that we get something, that we get all the grants, but I can't even imagine what I'd do if we got them all.
We're gonna have to throw to your own party.
Tell us.
$1 plan.
I know. Oh, I'm not worried that I wouldn't be able to spend the money.
That's what- I was trying to be polite.
We always say, yay, we got the grant, and
All right, guys, I'll call it, because it's a lovely night and I think we've exhausted this. Eric, thank you, for coming and doing that. If you wouldn't mind sending me your slides, I'll include it in my rolling notes that I have for my grant reporting.
Okay.
do you have a sign in?
More, yeah, I do have a sign in for anybody who missed it before. More, is that a hand raised or a yay, Eric?
No, I just, it was a clap. No,
what
it was a great presentation, Eric, and don't worry that you took too long. I actually, I'm still processing what you said and it was very fast, but, yeah, I'm gonna think about it.
Thanks, everybody. I'm gonna close the Zoom room. Have a good night.
Okay, you too. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.